Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today, we are doing chapter 14. Tibs swung the knife, pushing against the hand on his hand, holding him in place as hard as he could. The hand's back was arched and that was enough to put her stomach out of reach of his blade. She chuckled. I get your point. Well, more like it doesn't get me. In a direct attack, it's easy to stop you. But aren't all of you rogues about sneaking and catching people unaware? Having a sword at your hip is going to get in the way of that. Tib sheathed his knife as he stepped back. At least she hadn't dismissed him outright when he asked her to teach him sword fighting. But this demonstration wasn't going to be enough, it seemed. Not that I'm the kind of person who'll sneak and stab you in the back, he said, allowing to mask his offense at thinking every rogue was the same. But in the dungeon, there aren't a lot of chances to fight like that. And there's only 2 rooms with places to hide and sneak. The rats make better use of the boulders than I could. Tried throwing my knives, but Tandy can tell you how bad I am. The rogue behind Tian covered her mouth with a hand, but nodded when her team leader looked over her shoulder. Tibs tense as Fedora walked behind Jeff at that point. Jeff at the same time, but she was attentive enough not to try to pick his pocket with someone looking in her direction. They were at the edge of the fighter's training field, so there was enough coming and going. She didn't stand out too much as she kept walking behind the team and assessing them. It was going to help her do it. He was going to help her do that faster. Without him distracting them, they'd have noticed her at this point. It just means you need to practice more, Ian said, focusing on him again. I don't think there's enough time in the year for him to improve significantly, Sandy said, chuckling. Not that bad, he protested. He was, but she should be supporting him at least a little. We were both rogues after all. And until I do get better, there's still the problem of surviving. She nodded. True. But there's the problem of your strength. I don't know if you can get strong enough any faster. It might be best if you Tibs quickly stepped forward, pulled the sword out of the scabbard at her hip, using earth essence to strengthen his arm, and raised it to her chest. He smiled and opened his mouth to make a point that he was stronger than he looked, but pain lanced through his arm as it cramped up and he dropped the sword. Tibs? She hesitated while the rest of her teams moved closer. I'm okay, he said between breath. As long as he kept his arm cradled to his chest and didn't jostle it, pain was tolerable. It's that damn corruption. Always passed, but would this time be minutes or hours? He caught Fedora picking a coin out of Amid's robe and felt better. She was taking full advantage of the distraction he was inadvertently providing. From when you saved the dungeon, she said, lowering her voice, and glared at her. He endured it from stranger, people who weren't runners, who didn't know him, but he knew she'd have done the same thing if she'd been the one Sto had called to. He was no different than any of them. He was just a runner. Well, the cleric healed you. They weren't able to clear the corruption out entirely. They said it was because of how much there was. They were right, he thought, even if they didn't understand how it could happen. The corruption hadn't seeped into his essence immediately, only as more of it spilled out of the box and onto him. A lot of it cleared out by itself afterward. It's not like what Dawn does. It's not poisoning me, it's just there doing this, his arm, every so often. She picked up her sword and ran a finger along the edge. He felt the essence flow, even if he didn't see the effect it had. Payan wasn't as showy with her use of essence as some runners were. Sorry, I wasn't planning on dropping it. She smiled. It's okay, an easy fix. But there's a chance your arm will seize up like this. But if there's a chance your arm will seize up like this, I'm not sure now is the time to learn how to use a sword. She considered something as she sheathed it. Does it only happen when you strain yourself? He shook his head. It just happens. I don't know. How much I exert myself isn't a factor. More like it's looking to make my life miserable. He grumbled. So it's very much like Dawn. chuckled along with them. Yes, in that aspect, the corruption sorcerer was very much like his element. Surprised he can't get all of it, Carl said. And you know what? Yeah, I should remove this at this point. That was a question for me and my co-scriptor. Purity is the opposite element of corruption. I think they wouldn't just give up on it. They couldn't even tell there was any left in him anymore. They thought the cramping was them seeking attention, and they told him to stop bothering them with this when he saw one of them out during one of his trip backs to Craggle Rock. Maybe you're right, he said, wincing as if the pain was especially high and getting his attention back on him. Fedora had fingers in his pocket again, and maybe she was. Right. And maybe she was. Maybe he was. Oh, and maybe she. Okay. Maybe Payan was. Another place. And maybe Payan was. What was the point of learning to properly hold the sword only for him to drop it or have his leg buckle under his weight? She's right, Tibs, Jeff said. Focus on getting healthy, then see about learning something new. Learning already takes a lot out of you. He knew that. He had the headaches from learning his letters and numbers. Just want to be more useful to my team, he said. Did he not? Did he? He did not whine. Says the person who took on an adventure by himself. And won. Expression turned serious. Tibbs, I don't think any of us would have tried it, let alone won. Don't undervalue yourself. You'd have done it, Tibbs replied. The dungeon is our life. If you'd known what was happening, you would have done everything you could to protect him. Ian and Jeff exchanged a look. I'd like to think you're right, Tibbs, she said, while the other three didn't look certain, but you're the one who did it. That's right. You showed you're valuable. You are. You're valuable just by being willing to take on an adventure. And that's even if we don't take into account the other ways you've helped your team. You were the first one. You were the first ones to open the boss door, and I expect that's because of you. I thought I was the first one to notice it. I just happened to have an element that let me make tools needed to pick the lock. Someone else had. Tibbs just said. The fact someone else could have done something doesn't take away from what you actually did. I did a run with you, remember? Maybe you aren't physically impressive, but you are smart, determined, and probably even better. And probably, why? I don't know. Probably even better. Unlike a lot of people in this town, you're eager to help. Once you're healed, you'll be back to being a great help to your team and you'll learn to use a sword or not. But until then, no, you'll be back to being a great help to your team that you learn to use a sword or not. But until then, you need to take it easy and let them look after you. Smile. There are plenty of other rogue-related skills you can still work on, and that will make you an even better member of your team, right? Tips nodded. The pain in his arm had lessened. Maybe that contributed to him feeling better. Gotcha! Carl exclaimed, grabbing Fedora's arm. I knew I'd felt something, you little piece of... Carl, Tips called. Don't hurt her. I told her to pick your pocket. The fighter stared at him in disbelief. After Jeff went on about how helpful you've been, you're stealing from us? No, please. She's Omega and she needs the practice. We've been there and you know how little they teach at the training ground. None of you had noticed her. I'd have made her give everything back. And glared at him while Cloud pulled Fedora forward. You should have told me what you were doing, Tibbs. Not said this wanting to learn as an excuse to get us here, so she'd train. I do want to learn, he insisted. This just turned into a convenient way to add to her training. And if I told you, you'd have been on the lookout for her. I wouldn't have told the others, Tibs, and I wouldn't have reacted if she'd stolen from me. It's the courteous thing to do. Leave him be, Pian, Jeff said, placing a hand on her arm. He's trying to help someone new to this. I know I'd have liked help when I got here. Sorry, Tibbs said. I didn't think you'd mind. Tried to throw it. In emotion 4. To return what she'd taken. I let out a slow breath and patted the archer's hand. Just check in with me next time? Nodded. Not that there would be a next time, with the others looking at him suspiciously. But I only had a few coppers and 1 silver. She stared at and seemed reluctant to return it. Carl gave her the time to make the decision herself. Now that he'd gotten over his surprise and anger, he looked understanding of her behavior. I'm proud of you, Jeff whispered in Pian's ear, then nuzzled her neck. Cut it out. I didn't do anything special. The archer wrapped his arm around her. You held that famous temper of yours. That deserves a reward. And that's my signal to go find something else to do, he said, before walking away. Remember to stay away from the room, Carl called after him, then looked at his teammates with a roll of the eyes and also walked away. Then they looked at them wistfully, got angry at Mez because of it. They didn't know how close the two of them had gotten, but him choosing that noble over her had hurt. Come on, Fedora. They're going to have them. They're going to have them time. We don't want to be around for that. We recognized the looks they were giving each other. Jekyll and Crozov got similar ones before vanishing in the back of the inn. At least as friends. At least his friend didn't bring Crozov to the team's room to do that stuff. Can you really fight an adventure and win? They're asking Tibs. Jekyll was on his bed when Tibs entered, sitting shoulder slumped, head down. He was looking at his hands like he didn't know whose they were. Kieran and Kumdar were watching the fighter wearily from bed. Mez wasn't there, only with his special girl. She could look after him. It shouldn't feel good that the archer had gotten a mild fever from the splint. You know what? I'm gonna take out the mild. I'd gotten a fever from the splint Tibbs had done on his arm. What happened? Tibbs demanded cautiously when no one said anything. I'm Lambda, Jekyll replied, as if that was the worst thing to happen to him. How? Erna asked, dismayed. Is that not a good thing? Dar asked. Fighter sighed. Something about having to hold myself together while I was stoned pushed my essence out of my reserve and through my body. Turns out that's what's needed to graduate from a rogue to Lambda. Or were you even a rogue? Ito shook his head. Been avoiding getting tested since Tibbs showed us how to stop thinking of showed us how to stop thinking of, you know what, this is Jackal speaking. I've been avoiding getting tested since Tibbs showed us how to stop thinking of my essence as the element. He closed his eyes in pain. One of the instructor heard me bragging about how I'd fought the golem and held myself together on the way back and ordered me to the guild for testing. I snickered and fought to regain absurdness. It isn't funny, Jekyll whined. Did in by your need to brag. She replied, unable to stop from snickering again. It sort of is. Jekyll sighed. Ah, it kind of is. What was the test? Tibbs asked. Knowing that ensured he could fail it and not graduate. Levity aside, Dar said, I still fail to understand why this is treated as if you have learned that your father has taken ill. Jekyll snorted. Trust me, this isn't the face I'd make if someone told me my dad was sick. You rub this face. The problem is that I'm now too strong for this level of dungeon. The dungeon's only upsilon, since it has 2 floors, The guild only allows one member on the team to be one level higher than the dungeon. That would be Row. I'm now one level above that. They aren't kicking you of the team, Tip stated. I wasn't letting them do that. They considered it. My instructor said that there was talk of sending me to a different dungeon, one that recently started taking in Lambda adventurers. But you aren't adventurers, you're a runner. Definitely, Pickle said, smiling. But it isn't like the guild cares about what we think it should do. Believe it or not, Knuckles talked them into keeping me here. Would he not be the first to want you to leave? Condor asked. He has made it clear he does not like you. This would suit his desires greatly. Yeah, Jekyll said bitterly. Which got to make you wonder what the guy's planning. He had a memory from while he was sick with corruption. Vague enough, he wasn't sure if it was more than a dream. Harry, talking about Jackal, he didn't recall the words, but his love for the sense that his animosity toward his nephew was more an act than anything else. But right now, there was only one thing out of this that matters. So, you're staying. That's good. Yeah, Butter smirked. You're even you're even the team that stuck with me. Now the long face makes sense, Karina said. Everyone knows you can't stand us. Nicholas smiled, but it faltered. The problem is that rule about only one row per team. With me as Lambda, they aren't going to let anyone graduate and stay. Tibs and Karina exchanged a look. Alistair had explained his test, and now that Tibs had figured out how to manipulate essence while sensing it, he would pass it. Only a little training. I fear I am not familiar with that rule. I did not seek to investigate it when your uncle mentioned it, since I do not expect the guild will be able to apply it to me, as they do not normally train clerics. You remember what Harry said, Fiona replied, and you know all there is to know. All there's to know. What? You remember what Harry said, Fiona replied. Then you know all there's the where? All there. You know all there's to know. Then you know all there's to know. He mentioned mainly for the nobles, since the guild can't control their levels as they can with us. But what Jekyll said, we're also subject to it. The reason is that it makes it too easy for a team to build the dungeon if the runners are strong. You need to remember that as far as the guild is concerned, our primary function is to feed the dungeon. Then they should let stronger people in, he said. You'd have to increase the difficulty to match them, and everyone else would die as a result. That's why I can't just drain the essence out of the creatures. Are they able to enforce such a rule? Kendall raised a hand at the glares they gave him. I do not ask if they are allowed to make such a rule, but how long until so many runners have reached row that it is no longer feasible for them to have teams with only one person at that level? I don't think they care, Jekyll said. Maybe then, if the dungeon hasn't graduated, they'll send those of us who can't do run here to another one. Then we don't let them test us, they said. If they don't know what our rank is, they can't break up the team. Can we refuse to be tested? Kieran asked. My teacher was testing me after each run. The only reason I haven't been tested this time is that she didn't know we'd gone in first. I'm sure she'd have been back already if she did. She thought about something. Don't know how easy it'll be to fail the test, or at least without her realizing I'm failing on purpose. Everything I do is easier since you made me realize the truth of essence. Would Tibs not be able to convince the guild leader not to disband our team, despite us having more than one member who is Row? Jekyll and Karina looked at Tibs. He sighed. Isn't that going to be like us, going in before everyone else? The others aren't going to be happy when they're the only team that isn't broken up. Will any of them know we should be broken up? Karina asked. You might not be able to hide it, Jekyll, once the story of how you survived spreads, but Jekyll started. It's already spreading. Turns out that clerics like to gossip. Still, so long as the rest of us avoid doing anything public, they could think we're still Upsilon, regardless of what the guild knows. You mean like a centered someone running along the roof and leaping much further than anyone can? Like a leveled his gaze on Tibs. What? He looked at them. I can't do that. People looked surprised. You mean you aren't running around testing all those essences you have? I am. I haven't. I don't have enough in any of them to do anything. I'm falling through the air disc when I've tried it. So the stories of the roof runner I've been hearing are not about you? Echo was grinning again. The shrug. I'm not the only rogue running the roofs anymore. Not that I've done it since saving the dungeon. It's too dangerous to have the corruption cramp my leg in the middle of a leap. If I can't land properly, a fall will end up killing me. Little frown. Then it's definitely someone else. They've been seen over the last week. I was here every night. How did you think it was me? I sleep, Echo pointed out. I don't think you do. He rolled his eyes. I do. And I'm wishing for this cursed corruption to go away because it's going to kill me sometime soon, the way it's going. Off of the water when I fell off the ledge, and I've broken my neck there. I nearly died when my leg buckled under my weight in the middle of a fight. I was holding a sword this morning, hindered horribly as my arm cramped, and Kian wouldn't train me because of it. Sighed, misery creeping in. Maybe he should convince them to get a different road. He could convince Tyrannia to let that happen, even if he wasn't dead. Done with bitch, but he. What did you say? He'd ask, head snapping up. He'd been so lost in his head, he'd only caught the few words, but corruption and ask close together where it was noteworthy. Said that considering you can do the audience thing with other elements, people said, maybe you should just jump into the corruption pool and ask the element to remove its essence from you. Its essence from you. Tip stared at the fighter. That has got to be the stupidest. He trailed off. It was stupid. There was no of that. But and this ends chapter 14 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please hit a thumbs up, give it a like. If you want to know when the next one's going to be, subscribe, hit the bell. Share it with your friends. It doesn't quite qualify as torture yet. If you want to read more about this story or the first book, it is available for free on Royal Road. If you want to support me, you can do that on Patreon, and you'll get to read ahead of what is posted, as well as plenty of other stories I've posted there. If you want to watch me do this live, do it on Twitch as well as Write. All the links are in the notes. But I shall wish you a good day.